Hey, how did your storybook writing go? Are you still working on your book or are you done? Yeah, we always have stories going in our house. We think that it's really fun to be able to use our imagination in this way. I thought I would show you my 9-year-old's book. It's called The Sunny Day. And she's drawn pictures. We have a laminator and a binder at our house. This is called a binder that makes books into books, but you can bind your book anyway. You could staple it, you could sew it, you can make it hardcover, and she's written it all by hand and then drawn really cool pictures below it. And it's all about her day and her adventures with friends. I was really proud of her for this book. She did a great job. Okay, so we're back in to Dr. Seuss. So the last time we left him, he had given up writing children's books for 7 years to turn his attention to the war. So Ted began drawing political cartoons that criticized people who thought America should stay out of the war. He showed them with like ostriches with their heads buried in the sand, ignoring the danger around them. And basically what he felt was that America should be a part of this. They should be putting a stop to it. They shouldn't be just pretending like this isn't happening in the other side of the world. On March 7th, 1941, something happened. Germany's ally was Japan, and Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Now, this was a very long time ago, and you could look into that in more detail too if you talk to your parents about it, if that's an interesting thing to you. So at that time, once that happened, he was like, okay, drawing pictures, cartoons is just not enough. So at 38 years old, he was too old to be a soldier, but we know that he doesn't always follow the rules. So he enlisted for the Army anyways. The Army knew exactly what a gentle, clumsy artist that couldn't shoot a gun would do. And so they sent him to Hollywood, California. There, he made movies to train new soldiers. And so he came up with this character called Snafu that got into all of these predicaments, and it basically showed people what a soldier should never, ever do. Later, he was promoted to work on live films. He helped write 2 films about what the US should do in Germany and Japan after the war was won. Both of those films won Oscars, which Oscars are the biggest award that you could win for movies, and he won 2. Most people today would never have known. I never knew that, and I like the Oscars. With 2 Oscars to his credit, Ted thought maybe he'd work in movies instead of books. But he quickly changed his mind. He saw that the post-war world would be full of promise as well as danger. He had decided nothing was more important than writing children's books. So here is a man who gets into children's books just because he wasn't allowed to do anything else because of his contract with the Flit. And now he's like, no, this is my mission. And he said the new generations must grow up to be more intelligent than ours. Okay, so now the war is over and Ted and his wife Helen decide we're gonna stay in California. So they stay there and he started to write some more books. One of the first books after the war was called Thidwick the Big-Hearted Moose. Thidwick was too nice and he lets all the other animals push him around. At the end of the story, Ted asked the readers, well, what would you do if it happened to you? Ted ended a lot of his books this way by asking the questions. He wanted kids to enjoy his stories, but something had shifted. Now, he wanted children to be able to start to think for themselves. Ted began to turn over 2 books every year. They were funny, original, and very different from one another. People often ask Ted, where did you get your ideas? He usually said, I may doodle a couple of animals. If they bite each other, I know it's gonna be a good book. After a while, he just got tired of the same old questions. So he started saying he got his ideas from the people in a small town called Ubergletch. He says, I go there on the 4th of August every summer to get my cuckoo clock repaired. He even gave that answer to the President of the United States wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. Some of his books were inspired by the real world. I find this story very interesting. Okay, so in 1953, Life magazine sent Ted and Helen to Japan to find out how the country was coping after the war. Ted had mixed feelings about the Japanese. In his wartime cartoons, he had shown Japanese people, even US citizens, so people that are from Japan or their parents or their grandparents, but they were US citizens, as villains, so as bad people. And so this is called Prejudice. So people showed him prejudice when he was a kid because he was from Germany living in America, and people would throw rocks at him and stuff. So you'd think he would know better, but no, because of his experiences, because he saw Pearl Harbor happen, he automatically saw all Japanese people as villains, as bad people. And prejudice is believing something about people without actually any facts or without your own experiences. So sometimes we might hear somebody say something bad about somebody else. They'll be like, oh my goodness, that person is so mean. And then all of a sudden we start thinking, yeah, that person is mean, but we've never even actually talked to that person. We just assume because we've heard somebody else say it. So he had these prejudice about people from Japan. And then his wife and him are asked to go there. So what's going to happen? Is he still going to see them as villains, as bad people? Let's see. He says, but as he talked to teachers and school children in Japan, he got past this prejudice. This makes my heart so happy. There's nothing that saddens my heart more than prejudice and injustice. He saw that the people of Japan were trying to honor the importance of each individual and still work together for the common good. So back in his studio, Ted explored what he had learned in Japan. To do this, he returned to one of his most beloved characters, Horton the elephant. Did you end up watching Horton Hears a Who? It's okay if you didn't. You can watch it after this episode here. And it's amazing because if you've already watched it or you're about to watch it, you can think about it with new eyes to see, oh my goodness, there's like a story behind this story of this silly little elephant. In Horton Hears a Who, so it was based on his time in Japan, Horton must save the tiny world of Whoville by proving it exists. He can do this only by getting every Who, even the very smallest and laziest, to work together. Horton is willing to risk everything for the Whos because, this is what he says, a person's a person no matter how small. Did you hear that? A person's a person no matter how small. And so that doesn't just mean like in size, it means he's all of a sudden seeing this world as every person is a person, no matter where you're from, no matter how much money you have, no matter what school you go to, you're a person. Ted dedicated the book to a Japanese friend. By the time Horton Hears a Who was published, personal troubles had taken over. Helen suffered a terrible, terrible illness. And she, at that time, in order to breathe properly, she was put in this big metal case that enclosed her whole body. Ted spent hours just sitting beside her hospital. When she finally came home, she was still in this metal box, and he rigged up mirrors so that she could watch the dogs playing outside. So this is like the metal contraption that she was put in to help her body to breathe. The doctors were amazed because she recovered so fast and completely. And in May 1955, she was able to travel back to the school that he went to so Ted could get an honorary doctorate. So an honorary doctorate is something where you don't have to go to the school to get it. It's because you've done something important. You've done a lot of work towards something and they want to honor you with this degree. Remember, years ago, he disappointed his dad because he never actually got his doctorate. He never got his degree at Oxford, but now he made up for it. He was no longer the Dr. Seuss that he boasted. He was Dr. Seuss. And so he wasn't a doctor of medicine. There's all kinds of different doctors. You can be a doctor of theology. You could be a doctor of literature. There's so many different kinds of doctors. So don't just think he's not doing like heart surgery all of a sudden. In 1954, an article appeared in Life, a popular weekly magazine. It asked why American children had so much trouble learning to read. And we're going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. But I wanted to stop and I wanted to talk about the war and about the prejudice that he felt, because I think it's really important, especially in this time. I hear a lot of people even talking about China in a negative way because that is where COVID started from. And I want to really encourage us not to think that way. I want us not to have prejudice in our hearts towards anybody. Think about the person at school that's wronged you and you just don't like, or you've heard that somebody is unkind and you've believed it. I want to challenge you to really think through this and think through our hearts, to think, how can I love people that have wronged me? Or how can I look past the prejudice that the world might put on me and not fall into that? And so what I thought would be good is that today we think of how we can show kindness to those around us. And even more so, if possible, show kindness to somebody that you might have a prejudice against, that you might not feel love for. So when I think about Dr. Seuss and how he felt about people from Japan, once he actually put himself in that situation and he met actual people and didn't just believe the ideas that he'd heard or how he felt, he was able to show love, and he was able to write the most beautiful book, Horton, Here's a Who, and be able to see a person's a person no matter how small. And so maybe it's writing a letter to a neighbor to encourage them. Maybe it's thinking about somebody at school that you know comes from a hard home, that maybe you know that every day they had to eat lunch from a special lunch that was given from the school because they don't have food at their house. Sit down as a family and think of a way that you can bless somebody today. Maybe it's sending an Amazon order to somebody's house. Whatever it might be, do something to brighten somebody else's day and be able to see the world around us as every person is a person, no matter how small, and show love to those around us, because love wins every time. Love wins, and love conquers fear, and love conquers prejudice. So thank you, and have a fabulous day.